We got a full room.
Yeah.
Tuesday's a good night. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Warm in here? Or would you like to go outside and do a field tour?
No,
Good in here?
that feels good.
Okay. Well, welcome to Mitchell Community College. Welcome back to school for many of you. My name is Bill Kearney, and glad to bring you this class tonight. This is part of our what we call Adult Financial Literacy Series, and I'm glad to be able to teach here at Mitchell Community College. In addition to this, I also have my own private practice here in Mooresville. And the lovely young lady you met when you walked in is my office manager, but more importantly, my wife and the mother of my children. So we're kind of a family affair here with our office as well. I'll give you a little bit more about me, and of course there's some information in the folder in just a minute, but we need to do a couple things before we get started. First, if you see inside your packet, there's something called the event registration form. And I do incur some costs for putting these classes on, and I do like to let the IRS know about that so I can deduct those costs. So if you would indulge me by using your handwriting to fill in your information on here, I can prove to them I did a class. Okay? So I would appreciate that on there as well. Also, you'll see at the very top there's something called a financial confidence ranking. And I always like to do this at the very beginning of the class, where you get to circle from 1 to 10 how you feel about things. Your short, your long-term financial future, all those types of things. 1 would be not confident at all, I'm concerned, that type of thing. 10 is everything is great, perfect, got it all figured out. Okay? I always tell people if you're a 10, I probably can't help you, but enjoy the class. Hopefully you'll learn some things from there. But if you're anywhere in between, you'll probably learn some great things tonight. I think that will help you as well. Okay? So do those 2 things, and then you may come back and visit this again at the end of the class and feel a little bit differently about it. We'll talk about that a little bit. Also in your folder, and all of these things that I'm talking about right now are on the right side, and if you took it apart, that's fine. The identifying your risk style, this is something we're going to go through together in the class. This is an important part of what we do, so we'll go through that. And then the S&P historical performance chart is something we're going to talk about too, and the reason I printed this is it's a little hard to see on the screen when we get to it, so I want to make sure you're able to see the information on here as well. Okay? Now I know this screen's hard to see as it is. The one thing I love teaching here, the one thing that's difficult is the lighting. So what we're going to do is turn the lights out or down. I have this little light up here. It usually gives us enough light so you guys can see your paperwork. And your eyes will adjust, and hopefully you'll be able to see everything okay as we get started. Now let me tell you what this class, you guys turn down, what this class is and what this class is not. It'll take a minute to adjust, I know. This is not a sales event. I'm not selling anything tonight. Just relax. This is all about information for you. What I do like and what I do hope is that each and every one of you wants to come and see me. Spend maybe 45 minutes to an hour, go over your situation, your questions from this, okay? But you're not obligated to do that either. So just enjoy the next hour that we have together. We're going to kind of go quickly through some of these topics, but hopefully you'll be able to pick up some things along the way. And if you have questions, stop me. Now, if we get maybe too far into questions, I may stop and say, let's hold until the end, just to respect everybody's time, okay? So this is me, and you've seen the biography on inside of my folder as well. And I just want to give you a couple of disclaimers that I always like to do here. First of all, I'm not giving anybody in the room specific investment advice. Okay? This is a general presentation. I always like to say if you do learn something and it works out really well for you financially and you'd like to give me credit for it, I'd be happy to accept it. But otherwise, this is just a general presentation from here. Okay? Make sure that if you're considering products in the future that you read all your disclosures on them and make sure you know about your fees and all types of things like that inside of it, okay? Okay, so I'm a retirement income planner. I've been doing this for just under 15 years now. As I said, I'm here in Mooresville, and I meet with people a lot. I've met with hundreds of families and helped them work through retirement income planning, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. And what I've found is that everything that I do boils down to about 3 questions. 3 questions that people ask me all the time. The first one is, how do I grow my money? Second one is, how do I preserve it and not lose it? And the third one is, how much income can I reasonably expect to get from that money, right? And will it last me a lifetime? Because that's really what it boils down to if you think about it. You've been working hard, putting money aside, saving it for the purpose probably of retirement, and you kind of want to know what it's going to do in retirement, how long it's going to last, correct? We kind of all agree that's what it's all about. So I kind of look at it this way, and it seems to me that what this is a journey. And we're all on a journey. We might be at different stages of it here. But your retirement plan is a journey too. It may be a long journey, it may be a short one. I don't know. But either way, we all pretty much have the same things in mind of what we're trying to achieve, which is we want to get to a place called peace of mindville. And what peace of mindville encompasses a lot of times is just making sure that your retirement's going to work out, your income's going to work, your kids are going to be okay, your health is all right. Those are kind of all the things that are in peace of mindville. But if you've lived long enough, you know that most of the times the plans you put in place generally don't work out exactly the way you set them out, correct? There's always bumps along the road, and this journey is going to be no different. So all along the way, there are things called retirement risks that are going to come up. They're going to cause you some stress and maybe some anxiety, things you're going to have to deal with that are going to affect your journey. That would be things like longevity risk, which is outliving your money. Okay? Inflation risk, which is that your income doesn't keep up with the rising costs around you. Excess withdrawal risk. A market and miscalculation risk. Sequence of return risk, which simply means you get losses in your investments early in retirement versus later. Rising taxes, and so on. And so what happens is any one of these types of risks can come up and derail where you're going, and you end up in a place called somewhere elseville. Okay? And somewhere elseville generally isn't the place you want to go, but that's how this can work. So here's what happens. This is a journey. It could be 15, 20, 30 years, 40 years for some people. What do you think would be one of the most important things to have for that journey? Anybody have a guess? What was that?
Money sounds good to me.
Yeah.
What was that?
I said money sounds
Money's
good to me.
one, right? Maybe a roadmap? GPS, a plan, right? Here's the interesting thing about that. So I've met with hundreds of people, and I ask all of them the same thing when they come in to see me. You know, what does your retirement income plan look like? And out of 100 people, how many do you think actually have a mapped out retirement income plan?
It looks like one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the screen it says one, right? And I got that one guy in red, he's it. It's really about maybe 2 or 3 over my entire career. I've had something that's mapped out, we're able to bring it in and explain it. And I find that interesting. This is something that's going to last a long time. It's critically important. There's a lot of things that can come up along the road, but not very many people have actually sat down and done a plan for it. Why do you think that is?
Because you live for today.
You live for today, that's a good reason. What else?
You don't know how?
What's that?
You don't know how.
You don't know how. Any other reasons? Those are good. How about the fact that there's about 100 things that are more enjoyable to do?
Yeah, that's true.
Right? How about it's hard to know who to trust? Has anybody ever been burned before by a financial person? Right? So that's no fun. So it's hard to know who to trust. I think a lot of what you guys said and those things are reasons why people don't do this, why they don't sit down and do it. And so here's what happens. We end up building a car kind of like this, right? So if you built a car that had a chassis from Ford, steering column from Chevy, engine from Volkswagen, tires from Jeep, and a transmission from Honda, and you put it all together, it probably looks something like this. Okay? Now, will that car run? It'll run, right? But will it win the Daytona 500? We get that term here in Mooresville, right? We understand how much. No, it's probably not going to run the race too well, but it will run. And so this is kind of like having a CPA that does your taxes over here, an investment person that manages your investments over there, an insurance person here, an estate person there, and so on and so forth. And that's fine, that's a plan. But the problem is those people don't communicate with each other. So what you have are individual pieces that are kind of put together as a plan, and they may not be working properly for you. They may not be custom built and made to work together. So Let me tell you a short story about this. I have a colleague who's a very, very close friend of mine in this field. He's in Chicago, does the same thing that I do. And several years ago, Steve was giving a talk to a manufacturing firm about their retirement planning, very similar to this. And he's going through all of these scenarios, just like we would normally do, and explaining things. And one of the executives raised his hand after about an hour and said, "Steve, this all sounds really great, but you know, we're manufacturers. When we have a problem, we just build a machine and we fix it. You know, can't you just take what you're talking about here and build a machine and fix it, an income kind of machine?" And he thought about it for a minute and he said, "You know, that's exactly what we do. It's a great way to explain it." So we went back and we kind of looked at it and we said, you know, if we were going to build a machine, it'd probably look something like this. So we did, and we call it our Perpetual Retirement Income Machine. You'll hear me call it PRIM for short. And it's kind of a great way to explain how you might build a retirement income plan or how you might manufacture it. So now, last month I was on an airplane, and you know how that goes. You're sitting next to somebody, you strike up a conversation, and the guy next to me happens to be in manufacturing. And so after about 20 minutes, he manufactures paper products for bathrooms or something, and it was very interesting. And after about 20 minutes, he said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm in manufacturing too." And he said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, he said, "What do you manufacture?" I said, I make income machines. He goes, "Income machines? Where do I get one of those?" And so I said, "I think that might actually work." So I'm a financial planner, but I'm really a manufacturer. I build income machines. And the purpose of the income machine is so that when you're ready to retire, you build it now. And when you're ready to retire, you flip a switch and the money comes out of the machine like that. And it goes on month after month, year after year for the rest of your life. Wouldn't that be a good way to start thinking about that? Does anybody want something that looks like that? I'm going to explain kind of how you would think about doing that tonight. Okay? So that's our PRIM machine. So here is the parts list for our PRIM machine. The two main components here are the variable income driver and the guaranteed income driver. Those are your two main components. The variable income driver are your investments. And you want those to be invested in such a way so that they're liquid. This is your spending money when you're in retirement. The guaranteed income driver provides a floor of income that you need for retirement. And you can kind of set this to a level that you want. Some things that would be considered guaranteed income: a pension, Social Security. So you probably have pieces of a guaranteed income driver already built. All right? Now, remember we talked about the retirement risk, and we're going to go into more detail on how those work and what they all are. But if you're going to build something like this, you have to take into account those retirement risks as well. So one thing that would be really nice to have is something called a longevity warranty, which would ensure that you can't outlive this thing. Okay? It's going to provide the income for the rest of your life. You also would want to have something called a sequence of return buffer. Now, sequence of return sounds a little complicated, but it's not. It's very simple. What you want to do is make sure that your investments don't correct on you in such a way that it upsets your income for the rest of your retirement. So this particular buffer would protect that. Then you need an inflation income booster. You want to make sure that your income increases to keep up with your rising costs due to inflation. Otherwise, you're going to have to take a step back in your standard of living. And then the big one here on top is the tax minimizer. We want to make sure that we have some tax-free income and that we're able to minimize the taxes you're going to have to pay in retirement. It's probably your largest expense. So those are the main components here built onto a PRIM system. That's basically what it looks like. And when you build it that way, you're able to deal with those retirement risks. Okay? Now, this is where we need to start with our risk style, because the PRIM system is great and you can build it with your income and do all those wonderful things to it. But what you really want to do is figure out what type of risk style you desire for it. Because if you don't do that, you won't enjoy the journey along the way. So what we're going to do as we go through these is identifying your risk style. We have the different retirement risks here at the top. And next to each one of them is a scale from 1 to 5. Okay? If you are very concerned about that particular risk, then you'll want to circle a 4 or 5, something in that area. If it's not a concern for you, you want to circle a 1. And we're going to total those up at the end. I promise that's as complicated as the math gets. Oh, and by the way, I know you all have Hershey's Kisses in front of you. We're going to do something with those, so if you hate them, we'll give you some more. Yeah, I know they're there. I know they're there. Don't worry, everybody eats them. That's what we do. So, okay, so this is the longevity risk, the first one we're going to go through. This is the fear of outliving your money. Now, anybody ever seen this picture before? It's a little bit dated now at this point. This is a picture of a family, 6 generations on one screen. Not many people have this happen, but it's to illustrate a point. Now, the lady in blue here, Sarah, how old do you think Sarah is right here? I think she looks pretty good for her age, but how old do you think she is? 100? Any other guesses? Everybody thinks 100.
Wow.
Poor thing, huh?
God, don't shoot me right now.
Now, her daughter's 95. Could you imagine? Sure hope they're not hoping on a mistake. Grandson Bob is 73. Great-granddaughter is 49. Great-great-granddaughter is 27, and the little guy there is 3. Now, Sarah passed away not long after this was taken at 118. Okay? She's one of the oldest people to live that long. Now, here's the point. If Sarah were in the room tonight and she was 65 years old, and I asked her, Sarah, how long do you think you're going to live? What do you think she'd say?
110.
110? She's like, well, my mother lived to 127, so.
Yeah.
No, she'd probably say, what, 85, 90, maybe, 95? You think she'd say 118? So she had to plan for a 53-year retirement in that instance there. Now think about it this way. When Social Security first came out, you know, people lived, retirement wasn't really much of a thing, but people lived maybe 5 to 7 years. It's not hard to plan for a journey that's 5 to 7 years long, right? But something that's 20, 30, 40, 50 years is a little difficult, a little bit more difficult. So where we are right now, people living a lot longer. Matter of fact, the benefit age for Social Security when it started was 3 years after life expectancy. So people weren't ever really supposed to collect it. Only rare cases, right? Now, life expectancy is about 13 to 14 years longer than benefit age for when people can start claiming. That's a big deal, big difference. So this is another way to look at this from a longevity standpoint. Survey of people ages 44 to 75. Allianz Life is the largest insurance carrier in Europe, but they're very big here as well. They do this survey a lot. The fear of running out of money by almost a 2-to-1 margin. People are more concerned about that than dying. And I always joke because if they die, that solves the problem, right? They don't have the longevity problem anymore. But people are concerned about this because I think they don't have it mapped out. They're not quite sure what's going to run out first, them or their money. So that's why we build in the longevity warranty on here. To make sure that the income that's built is something that you cannot outlive. So on your paper, if you would circle, is that a concern for you? 5, 4, 5 is a concern. 1 or 2 is not really. Okay? Now the second one here is inflation. We're probably all familiar with inflation, but we'll go through it a couple of different ways here. If you start today with $50,000, in 25 years with a 4% inflation rate, that $50,000 would buy about $18,800 worth of goods. At a 3% inflation rate, it'll buy about $23,800, 2%, $30,000, so 25 years from now. So what that means is you're going to have to increase your income to keep up with that. Here's another way to look at it. 1989, a jug of milk was $3.04, and your mid-sized car average 1979 was about $16,000. 2014, that same gallon of milk on average was $4.99, and that mid-sized car was up to $30,000. And then they're saying in 2039, a gallon of milk is going to be $8.19. Can you imagine that? And the average mid-sized car is going to be $62,800. Now, both of those are things that you may have to buy in retirement, aren't they? That would become a very large purchase. So inflation is going to have an effect on you. I'll tell you what, let's do this. Take a little field trip real quick. Anybody willing to volunteer the year they graduated from high school?
I will, I don't care. 75.
1975, okay. So, let's see if my calculator will work over here. Oop. It's a little tricky doing it, looking backwards. 75 you said, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what this is saying is that the average rate of inflation you've experienced over your working life is about 3.68%. So you go around any of those years in there, 60s, 70s, it's going to be around the 3% to 3.5% range, all right? So that's something you probably want to make sure you plan, that your income is going to increase as the years go by. Otherwise, what's going to happen is your standard of living is going to take a decline backwards, right? Went through that. Here's the last way to look at it. If you need $75,000 today to live, in 5 years you're going to need to draw $87,000 or $88,000 to equal what $75,000 will buy for you today. This is using a 3.24% inflation rate. 10 years you'll need $103,000. 15 years you'll need about 121, and then you'll need almost double in 20 years. This is where I find people that have some sort of income plan put together, this has been missed. Do people generally have rising income in retirement or flat? It's generally flat. And that generally doesn't work too well going forward. So it's something that you want to make sure you account for. And so this has an inflation booster. What this means is that when we talk about these little boosters and warranties and all these are the way the products have to be designed inside of your PRIM machine to make sure they're working to do these things. That's how this works. All right. This one's called excess withdrawal risk here. So what we're going to do is pretend that you're on a deserted island, you and your spouse, you and your best friend, whoever, and you have a couple of things available to you. It's paradise, but you need these things. You've got a big jug of water and you've got a genie. Okay? Now, the rules are that you can drink 2 cups of water, 1 for each of you each day, and that's enough. You can live on 1 cup of water each. And what happens is every day the genie comes back and refills your 2 cups. And this is kind of neat because you drink it, you're good, and next day the genie comes back and fills everything back up again. So you're going along, everything's fine. And then, after a few weeks, you have a really bad heat wave on the island, and you start sweating like crazy, and you realize, this 1 cup of water is just not going to be enough. So you draw out a little bit more. And it's okay, because the genie's coming back, but even as the genie's coming back and refilling the bottle, you notice the level's kind of going down a little bit. All right, so you go on a few more weeks, and now one of you develops a really high fever. It's bad. I mean, you've got to survive, so you draw out some more, and you notice that level's going down, and before you know it, that level's all the way out. Now, the rule at the very beginning was, if you emptied it all the way out, the genie would not come back. Okay? So now you're out of water, and the genie's not going to come back and refill it. You've got a big problem, right? It kind of ends in disaster. Well, excess withdrawal risk on your money is very similar. This is where inflation can kick in. Okay? This is where if you have an emergency, it can kick in. And it's slow. You don't quite notice it right away. But then, probably before it's too late, you've drawn that level down. And here's what happens. If you draw it down and you take out too much, it's hard to replenish that through investment growth in retirement. So this is one that catches a lot of people. It's a silent one. You don't realize that it's happening. Excess withdrawal risk. Here's a way to illustrate that. The blue line here is taking a 4% withdrawal rate. It shows you that you have a pretty good likelihood of success that you won't deplete your assets if you stick to that rule. It's called the 4% rule. It used to be the 5%, it actually used to be the 6% rule. Then we figured out that didn't work, it became the 5% rule, and then we figured out that didn't work, so now it's the 4% rule. And there is some talk about maybe making it the 3.5% rule. I don't know. But right here, the green line is a 5% withdrawal rate. Now, you're out of money here much faster, just by 1% increase in what you take out per year. and so on and so forth. The orange line here is 6%, and so on down the line. So taking out too much may deplete your income too quickly. Very tricky. So what you want to do is make sure that your income between your variable and your guaranteed drivers is sequenced properly so you don't draw out too much. You don't draw out too much. So we've gone through the inflation and we've gone through excess withdrawal risk. Let's catch up on our scoring here, if you will. Score yourself on the inflation risk and score yourself on the excess withdrawal part here. And then we're going to take a break from scoring to look at the chart here. So this chart you have in front of you, it's the S&P 500 historical chart. You may want to study this one with me for a couple of minutes. So this is showing you the last 17 and a half years. I haven't updated it to the end of 2017 just yet, of the S&P 500 index. And what I always find interesting, people come in the office and I always like to ask them, hey, how you doing with your investments? And it never fails. People say, I'm doing great. I'm a genius. And they are, because they're thinking about the period over here on the right side from 2008 on. It's the second longest bull market run in the history of the stock market. And they're not thinking about the rest of this stuff back here. If you go back here to the year 2000, you can kind of see this has been a yo-yo, right? Up and down. Well, if you take in the compounded annual growth rate, how this market is compounded over that period of time, you'll see up at the top here, this one says 2.73. I've updated that number on your page. It says 3.08. What that means is the market has compounded at about 3.08% per year, which is just above the rate of inflation. Okay? So, what that means is, for the last 17 and a half years, well, first of all, most people have not beat the S&P 500 compounded rates, and most professional money managers, upwards of 80%, have not beat what the S&P 500 did. So the question is, can you afford to go another 17 years where you essentially get zero growth rate on your money? That's kind of tricky. And here's the thing, I think that people either don't know this or they don't want to consider it. But this is the reality of what's actually happened. And I think you've got to kind of plan that this might be what the market looks like going forward. Now, add to that this. I like to ask people, what do you think the market's going to do, right? And you get a lot of different answers when you ask that question. And you guys probably have a lot of different opinions on that too. But here's the point. You know, if you draw that green line on your page, if that's what you think is going to happen, then what you're doing is you're plugging everything you got into the market, right? Plowing everything you have in because it's going to go up. Or maybe you're not quite sure, right? Last couple of days have been interesting, if you've looked at it at all. Or if you do the red line, then what you're doing is you're selling everything and getting out and going to cash and getting safe, right? But probably not doing that either because you're not sure and you don't want to miss the upside. And then there's people who don't know whether it's going to go up or down and they don't know what to do either. So here's the question. Wouldn't it make sense, if you don't know if it's going to go up and you don't know it's going to go down, to have some type of hedging strategy built into your plan so that maybe you can potentially make money when the market goes up or down? Right? Because I'll tell you that a lot of this here is emotional investing. A lot of these roller coasters here, and if you invest emotionally, from my experience, you're always going to pick wrong. But if you have some type of hedging strategy, it might be a little bit better option in retirement. We're going to talk about some ways you might do that here going forward. So, besides people maybe not quite understanding what their investments are doing, they also have some issues about how to calculate what their returns have actually been. Now, who here needs some replenishment on their Hershey's Kisses? A couple of people. We will hand some more out. What you need are 6 of these. We kissed everyone when they came in. We only have 3 left. Oh my goodness. You ate half your investment. This is not good investing, people. That right there is excess withdrawal risk.
We need one.
Just one? Now I promise after this one, you can eat it again. Two? We're handing out kisses, this is money, right? You can kind of follow along. We probably have enough. I own stock in the Hershey's company. Okay, we'll get up to you. So hand them out, it's wonderful. Ma'am, I need one. I gave some of mine out, yeah. This is a lot of work for a simple illustration, I promise.
Oh, is it 6 each? You're gonna pay or you can. If it's 6 each, we need 6 more. Yeah.
You do?
If it's 6 each.
Yeah, right here, grab it right here.
Oh,
We need 6 over here.
Man, we have some hungry people, we oughta.
Should have one.
Oh, is that right? We shorted you, you gotta watch out for those investments.
Like you said, when you're
You
trying
gotta watch out for those plans. Like I said, you don't know who to trust, and here we go. Okay, so everybody should be close to or have 6 kisses now, right? Now, I'm gonna start doing this, because if I hold them too much longer, they're gonna melt. Right? So here's what you need to do. Take 4 of them and put them aside. Just kind of line them up. You got 4. Leave the other 2 off to the side for a minute. That's our investment, the first 4. Okay? We're in the market. It's great. So the first year goes by and we gain 50%. So put your other 2 right next to it. That's awesome, huh? Move all your money here. We'll do that for you, Miss Kate. Now, the next year comes by and we lose 50%. So take 3 away. Okay? Now the average here is 0. Your average return is 0, right? Plus 50 minus 50 divided by 2. Does that seem to be in line with what you experienced? What happened? You actually lost 25% from where we started, right? You started with 4, you've got 3. But your average is 0. You hear a lot about average return, right? What's your average return then? What's the difference that you're looking at here is the difference between average return and compounded return. Compounded annual growth rate. See, I like to deal in reality. And compounded annual growth rate, which I explained before, this model here was 3.08% over the last 18 years, 17.5. That's reality. That's what actually happened. That's what actually we experienced. So, when you go talk to your advisor, you probably want to ask them, what is your portfolio's compounded annual growth rate then? Not your average return, but your compounded rate of return. Now, if they can't tell you what that is, that's a big red flag. Okay? You need to know what that is. So that's what we call miscalculation risk. So it's important to know the environment that your investments are in and how they're performing, right? And then how to calculate that. This is a pretty simple example, right? Now, the kisses are yours. You've all been re-kissed. You may eat the kisses, but the last part of that example on that part, all right? Now, the last risk style that we need to do here is something called sequence of return. Sequence of return is very simple, but very important. Sequence of return is an explanation of when your market returns and losses happen. Not what, but when. So what you're looking at on the screen here are 2 investment portfolios, 2 couples. Everything is exactly the same. The amount of money they start with, the amount of money they take out, right? Their income needs, how long they live, everything's exactly the same. The only thing that's different is we flipped their investment returns. The blue line had positive returns early in their retirement and negative returns late. The red line had the same returns but in reverse. They had negative early and positive late. If you remember 2008, 2009 at all, did anybody lose money back then? Do you remember watching, I remember watching this, it was very popular on 60 Minutes. They did a special about the 401k industry. And they were talking to people who were just about to retire and now they couldn't. That sequence of return. Now, when you're 40, sequence of return isn't such a big deal because you have time to make it up. When you're 55, 60, 65, you don't have the time to make it back up. All right? So sequence of return is a big deal. And what you want to do is make sure that the way your plan works, you won't get caught with this. Because this is a big one that can derail. We have no idea when the market's going to correct. It's going to correct, we don't know when. And it will catch a lot of people who won't be prepared for that part of it. Now, the greatest expense in retirement, and by the way, we'll get to that in a second. What you want to do with your risk part here is total this number up. Total that number up, and then in the middle, there's a score chart. And it has a little range there. And figure out which one you are. I'm going to kind of ask for a survey here in a few minutes of which one you are. So the highest you can be is a 20. The lowest you can be is a 5. And that's the difference between being a risk avoider and a risk taker. We'll talk about what that means in just a minute. Okay, so the greatest expense in retirement. Anybody know what this is?
Basically,
That's what everyone says, but not quite yet. It's close. Not quite yet. It's actually taxes. Americans spend about 29–30% of our income on taxes each year. And it's not going to change a whole lot in retirement, especially if you have money in qualified plans. There are a lot of strategies you can use to help reduce your taxes, minimize your taxes, minimize taxes on Social Security, maybe even eliminate taxes on Social Security. I don't have time to go into them tonight, but I just want you to know that that's part of what's built into the PRIM system here as well. It's part of the way it's built. We want to make sure that we minimize taxes. The more you can keep, it's not avoiding taxes, it's minimizing them. So the more you can keep, the more you have to deal with other things like inflation and things like that. Okay. So now we're going to talk about your risk styles a little bit here. Everybody seen this picture before? Right? Pretty famous picture. You know, these guys are sitting up on this beam, probably, 50 stories up above Manhattan. And they're just sitting there eating lunch and smoking cigarettes and hanging out. This is what they do every day. Now, to me and you, if we were up on that beam, we would probably feel a great deal of risk, right? It'd be a little bit concerning. I know I would. I don't know how they do it. If you ask these guys, are you guys taking a lot of risk? They would probably say no. They're comfortable doing this. This is what they do every day. So there's perceived risk, and everybody's perceived risk is a little bit different. It's the same thing with your investments. And there's also actual calculated risk. If we were sitting up on that beam with these guys, our calculated risk would be exactly the same as theirs. But our perceived risk would be vastly different. Which is why we just did this exercise on your risk scoring here. Because as I said earlier, you can build an income plan, but if it's not built to a level that you're comfortable with, you're not going to enjoy the journey at all. Okay? So here are 3 risk styles here. Anybody circle that they are a risk taker? No one?
Is that the 5?
That's the, that's 4 to 8 area. So no one circled risk taker. Okay. What about a risk avoider? A few risk avoiders in here. Okay, our definition says risk is not your cup of tea. If you see risk coming, you prefer to move in the other direction. That's this guy right here. Right? This is I guess you can guess that's the risk taker right there. Anybody a risk manager? Did you score yourself as a risk manager? Okay, that's about right. Most people are risk managers. That's the one that builds the bridge right here. Finds a way to get over that way. Those are the 3 styles of risk management. So now what I'm going to do is show you how you might scale your PRIM system to match your risk style. Okay? So for example, the risk takers love risk. So they're going to do a systematic withdrawal strategy. Your risk avoider uses something called a flooring strategy. And then your risk manager uses a bucket strategy. Now, it doesn't have to be locked in stone. You can change these if you change your mind on things, but it's a good little exercise to start with, okay? So now, this is the risk takers PRIM. We don't have any risk takers in here, so let's talk about them a little bit. This is what risk takers like to do. First of all, you'll notice that the risk taker's variable income driver is much larger than the guaranteed income driver. That's because they love things to be of a variable nature and they love taking risks. So, let's take their basic fuel supply. Now, don't let $1 million scare you here. We're just using a round number. You can build a PRIM with 250, 500, whatever. And they can all be scaled to what you need them to do, but this is just an easy way to use the numbers. Now, in each of the examples, we're going to be seeking an income of $85,000 a year to start with. Now, over here, this person still has some guaranteed income, Social Security, and a pension. Social Security provides about $35,000 a year, the pension's about $10,000. Anybody have a pension that they're expecting? Great, those are wonderful. That's part of your guaranteed floor income. They're kind of a dying breed though, not a whole lot of people have them anymore. Now, the rest of the income is going to come here from the variable source here, from their investments. And that gives them their total of $85,000. Now, here's what it looks like in a rising market for the risk taker. Here's what's happening. They're taking $40,000 a year out, but it's great because the market's going up 6%, see? In that sense there. At the end of that time period, they've got about $1,068,000. Things are looking pretty good. Here's what it looks like in a falling market. They're still taking the same $40,000 out, okay? And we're sequencing a little bit for inflation as well. We did that on the upside too. We're going down 6% a year on average here, so now the money's running out pretty quickly. So here's what happens. They have what's called a very large uncertainty zone, which is okay with risk takers because they love uncertainty. By the way, you can see on this one right here how sequence of return comes right into play at the start, if that's the situation you run into early in retirement. So the risk avoiders, who are my risk avoiders? A few risk avoiders in here? Okay. So your PRIM might look something like this. Very small variable and a very large guaranteed income driver down here. Matter of fact, you don't even have an output on your variable driver. You do not want anything to do with variable. It's okay. Here's how that one looks. Same, we call your assets here fuel supply. It's kind of a shift in the way you think about them. But we call what you have as a fuel supply. So we're talking about $1 million fuel supply in this example. Again, same income. Now here's what we're doing with this one. Everything's coming from guaranteed. So they have the same Social Security, pension, and the rest of their money comes from this guaranteed side here. Now, Social Security and pension are annuities. Annuities simply mean regular payments, guaranteed payments, lifetime payments along those lines, right? That's what it means. So the alternative is you can buy a private annuity yourself. So a guaranteed income person is going to look to do something like that. So to generate $40,000 a year, they have to input about $727,000 on the front end. So it's not the entire million. Now here's what they can do. They have $272,000 left over that they don't need for their income. And they can go and invest that for growth, and they don't really care what happens because even if they lose it, it doesn't affect their income floor over here. So in that sense, they might actually do a little bit of variable investing. So here's what it looks like in a rising market for the risk avoider. Now what we did here is we made the investments a little bit more conservative because it's guaranteed income, so it's going to be a little bit less than invested in the market. $40,000 withdrawals here. And at the end, you've got about $674,000 here left in this account. You've also invested that leftover money at around 4%. You've got about $340,000 for a total of about $1,014,000. Now that's interesting because it's not too far off from what our risk taker had over the same period of time. Now watch this. In a falling market, the risk avoider has an interesting situation. Where'd my lines go? They fall off a cliff. Oh, Mitchell Community College wants me to log into Wi-Fi. I don't want to do that. There, that should work. Okay. So in the falling market, we still need our $40,000. Now look at this. The market is declining, but these are principally protected areas, so you're not losing money. You're not losing the principal here. The only money are the withdrawals that are coming out. Notice that? And then in a falling market, these assets are declining some here as well, but again, this isn't required for income, so that's okay. At the end of that same analysis period, you've got about $777,000 left over, which is significantly more than the risk taker. Now here's what that uncertainty zone looks like, much smaller, right? Overlay it with the risk takers, you can see the difference. Now the last one is the risk manager's PRIM. This is what most people look like. Doesn't mean you can't do the other ones, it's what most people look like. And what you do here is you build a bucket strategy. The first thing you do is you settle your guaranteed income. Now what this person wants to do is have about 75 of their 80,000 come from their guaranteed sources and the remaining 10,000 come from their variable income. Kind of a balance between the two. So the first thing you do is you settle your income floor, Social Security. What we did is we, these columns here are 5-year periods. So we're showing you an increase in Social Security because that does have cost of living increases. The pension does not. And then they might have an annuity that's providing some income as well. So there's their total floor income. This will be the first 5 years, years 6 through 10, 11 through 15, and then 16 through 20 as an example. So we got the floor income dealt with. Now we're going to do something called consumption-based investment buckets on the top. So on the very bottom here, we're determining this is what we need over these segments of time. This 5-year period, we know we need about $10,000 a year. So we might take $50,000 and just put it in a savings account. And that'll take care of the first 5 years. Next 5 years, we know we need about $19,000 a year or so. So what we're going to do is set aside $85,000 of what they have, grow it at 3% so that it's ready in year 6. And so on and so forth with the remaining income. We need to be a little bit more aggressive down here. And then the last part might be, it's longer term, so it might be a growth model on that side. So that's kind of a bucket strategy that someone would use. And this is how it's mapped out. Now, doesn't this kind of look like a blueprint? If you're building a house, if you're building some type of plan, this is a blueprint. And this is how you kind of line everything up to make sure that it works. Then you put your risk pieces on here, your risk minimizers, your tax minimizers, and you have a ready to go, ready to flip the switch PRIM machine. Here are those uncertainty zones. So the risk manager is somewhere between the two, between the risk avoider and the risk taker. So that's how you would kind of sequence the construction of it so that it falls in line with what you're comfortable with. Does everybody understand that? Okay. So how do you do this, and who can do this? Well, what I would suggest is that you probably want to have a fiduciary look at something like this, someone who's holistic, unbiased, objective in what they're doing. And the reason is, if you look on the green side, and green doesn't mean good, and red doesn't mean bad. Green means that you cannot lose money in those types of accounts, and red means that you could lose money in those types of accounts. That's all it is. Typically what you have in our field on the green side are insurance agents provide these products here. And they typically don't provide anything over here on the red side. And conversely, your stockbrokers, investment managers, bankers, they typically work in this area here, and they can't sell these over here, or their company won't let them, or that type of thing. They're captive in that sense there. What you really probably want is somebody where it doesn't matter what you pick, and I frankly don't care what my clients pick along that spectrum, as long as it's the best thing for their PRIM design. That's what a fiduciary would do for you in that sense there. So that might be the kind of person that you're looking for. Now a banker, those types of people might be fiduciaries, but they may not be able to operate on the entire spectrum there. So that's probably who you want to be looking for as well. Now if you build something like that, what you're going to do is increase the chances that those risks are going to be minimized or eliminated in your retirement. Okay? And you end up in peace of mind building. Now, I like to tell people, we're just about done here guys, I like to tell people that the PRIM building is, it's what we do, it's a part of what we do, but it's not the whole thing. I like to be the kind of person that people call on their journey when things come up, right? You've got a parent going into a nursing care facility. You have some type of accident that happens to you. You need to decide whether to buy or lease a car. Kids are going to college, or grandkids are trying to help fund those types of things. That's what we like to do with our clients, so that we're kind of a one-stop shop, if you will, as far as financial planning. I don't do estate work for people, but I work with estate attorneys that do that type of thing. So we like to make sure that the whole picture is covered in what we do. And this is a big one down here, the tax reduction plan for IRAs and 401ks, how to create tax-free income. And most people are going to be overtaxed on their Social Security. There's a tiered system that the IRS uses to determine how much they're going to tax you on your Social Security benefit. And most people fall right into that particular track. So that's a big one that we like to go through as well. Okay? We would like to see if we can help you with one of these. Here's what we'll do, and our time's just about up here. And what I typically like to propose to folks is this. Now, I bet you probably came here and you had no intentions of making an appointment. There's absolutely no way you're going to do that type of thing, and that's fine. But if you heard something here tonight that piqued your interest a little bit, or you have some questions, or you're not quite sure, and you want to sit down and talk about it, I would like to sit down with you for 45 minutes to an hour. I'll answer your questions. I'm not going to try and sell you anything when you come to the office. That's not how it works. Okay? It's just a visit. And really what we're trying to do there is determine, should we meet again? Do we need to meet again? All right? And this is the way it works. Let's say that after that 45 minutes, we decide that it's not good for us to meet again. That's okay. And when I see you at Costco or at Sam's Club, don't hide behind the giant mayonnaise jars and feel awkward and embarrassed, okay? It's fine to do it that way. But if you're not sure where you are with all of this or what your plan looks like, you want to have it looked at or have some questions about it, what you can do on that registration form at the very bottom, check the box down here that says, I'd like to be contacted. Natasha will call you. And if you don't have your calendar with you, that's fine, but you could also indicate down here some times that are available for you, and we'll try and work you into our schedule. If you look around the room, there's a lot of you and one of me. And I just did this class again on Thursday, so I get filled up quickly. But I wouldn't want you to miss the opportunity to possibly change the direction and the course of your retirement future through all of that. So again, if there's something that interests you, put it down. Leave these before you go. Leave these with us because you do need them for the tax part of it, the deduction part of it from there. So that's what I have for you guys tonight. Did this help? Was it worth coming to? Are you glad you came?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yes, sir.
So, how many people are retiring, really, truly retiring at 65? What percent of the people do you talk to?
That's a good question. And everybody's definition, I guess, of retirement is a little different. For a lot of people, it seems nowadays it's just doing something different. It's not just
Well, I'm talking about quitting work.
quitting work. I'd say probably at least half. But not all of that is just because they don't or they can't at 65. Maybe they don't want to. So I'd say at least half of them do or plan to. Yes, sir.
Just a question, when you use the term fiduciary, is there a legal difference between fiduciary and sole fiduciary?
No, I think there's, not really. Those terms can kind of be commingled. There's a difference between a fiduciary and a fee-based fiduciary. So that might be a little bit of a difference.
The only reason I was asking is because I've heard the term fiduciary means is that the individual or the entity is working for the client's best interest.
Right.
Okay?
And, yeah.
But a sole fiduciary required that they work solely for the best interest. In other words, that it's like, well, if I make a fee and you make some money, then fiduciary-wise, I'm good because I've made you money. I haven't guaranteed you anything. I made you money, but I've made some extra money.
Right.
Because I've sold your stuff to a fee-based process where you're not being get the fees, but what's happening is that I'm getting the money, but they're actually taking out of my account.
I'll tell you the way you clear that up.
Yeah.
You find out if they're a fiduciary, which in my world means I'm working in your best interest. And I have to be able to produce that documentation to the Securities and Exchange Commission if they came in and said, your name's John, why did you recommend John do that? So I have to be able to document that.
Okay.
Number two, what really you need, no matter what, is fee transparency. When you go through and you build this system, you're ultimately going to need products probably to make it work.
Right.
Those are the machine parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to know what the fee looks like that person's getting,
Right.
the company is getting, and you're paying. That's fee transparency. You want to document it. If it's not being documented, that's wrong. That's not the way it's supposed to be done. So that kind of clears most of that up. And I don't have a problem doing that personally. I'd rather you know that so that when you see this great system built, you're not elbowing your wife on the way home saying, hey, that all sounds great, but what's in it for Bill? Right? That's not good. That's not a relationship that you're really building with somebody. That's not trust. Does that help?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I got one.
Yes, sir.
What's the average age today that people start collecting their Social Security? Some people tell you take it as soon as you can. Some people say wait. You know, because
The way we answer that is by your plan. Your plan will dictate when is the best time to do that.
Okay.
And it's very clear when that comes through. Otherwise, I think you're kind of shooting at a bunch of variables. But build the plan first and you'll know when the right time is to do that. Because you can play with it inside the plan to figure out different scenarios that way. Good question. So there isn't really an average. It's more of everybody's all over the map based on their plan.
You know, you talk to a lot of people. Oh, as soon as you're eligible, you take it because you know, over your lifespan, it's better to take it early than wait because, you know, and that's the hardest decision in my eyes to try to make.
Yeah, nobody knows how long they're going to live.
Right.
Like Sarah, it would be great if she took it
Yeah,
at 62, right? But nobody quite knows how long they're going to live. But a lot of it also has to deal with how does it sequence in with your income plan, right? And that's where you kind of develop the plan that way.
You know, my wife and I, we've made some good investments over the years. I own some rental properties, I own 2 businesses, and like I'll be 62 next year and 19. So I got to figure out what the next step is, you know?
Well, I would suggest it's probably some type of income plan like this, but you've learned a lot about that tonight,
Yeah.
so hopefully. Any other questions?
Wouldn't Sarah have been a lot better if she had waited till 70?
Probably, but I don't know if she had any kind of income plan or if it even mattered to
Yeah,
her.
but I'm just saying, if you live longer,
Yeah.
and the longer you wait,
Yeah,
the better off you are.
So her full benefit age was probably like 64. So the difference between 64 or 65, let's say, and 70 is 5 years. It takes about 13 and a half to 14 years to break even, so she clearly would have been better off doing it that way. But I don't know what her other needs were, or what her other issues were, and how they went to do a plan. Anything else, guys? I'll stick around as long if anybody wants to talk individually or ask questions, that's fine. Otherwise, thank you guys for coming out, I appreciate it. And if you would leave your registration form, you can just leave them on the way out. And we also have one of these little packets here, by the way, that you can take with you. This also tells you, just so you can remember, what to expect if you come visit me, what to bring with you, those types of things, and how to find us if you're looking for us, okay? Thank you all very much.